Let's take a look now at how to configure NAT once it's been installed. So we'll go to Routing and Remote Access. And here in Routing and Remote Access, NAT has been installed and we've assigned two interfaces. We've assigned a public interface, which is Local Area Connection 1, and a private interface, Local Area Connection 3. And by the way, one thing to be very careful about is to assign the correct logical interface here to the correct physical interface. For example, in your network connections, you'll have two NIC cards, for example, in the same computer for NAT. And one of these will be attached to the public network, one's attached to the private network. Well, just based on this, you can't tell which one's which. You have to get into the TCP/IP properties to figure out which one's which. Let's say local area connection 1 is your actual public interface. It's connected to the internet. It's got a public IP address. But let's say through NAT here, you accidentally said private interface. That gets your wires crossed, so to speak, and NAT will not function correctly. In fact, it's a very common test question for certification, where they simply reverse these, where the public interface, local area connection 1, is the public interface, but in NAT it was misconfigured as the private interface, and vice versa. So it is easy actually to swap those, so be careful that you're assigning the appropriate interface. Okay, to manage NAT, let's go ahead and right-click the NAT protocol, properties. Take a look at some of our options here. Logging is always an option, so the more logging you do, the more events you have, but that's usually more resource intensive, so you limit that unless you're troubleshooting. Translation, this is all about how NAT works. What NAT does is it translates between public and private addresses, and it keeps track of the mappings between the public and private IP addresses. So we've got TCP and UDP mappings there. Let's just keep going here. We've got address assignment. NAT, the NAT server here, can act as DHCP, also known as a DHCP allocator. It's important to know the defaults here. The default is that the NAT server itself will take the IP address of 192.168.0.1 and then give out subsequent numbers to internal clients. For example, .2, .3, .4, etc. Because of that subnet mask, the default Class C subnet mask, every internal computer, including the NAT server, will have 192.168.0 for their prefix. You could also set up an exclusion range in case you had servers internally that were using static IP addresses. In likewise fashion, on the Name Resolution tab, NAT can function as a DNS server. So we can have our clients point to NAT for the purpose of using DNS, and then the NAT server can go out to a valid DNS server and get responses to queries. So with NAT, if you have an internal DHCP server already, you can turn off the DHCP allocator. And likewise for DNS. If you have an internal DNS server, you can certainly uncheck that, and the NAT will not get involved.